Hello, friends. I totally didn't almost forget to hit the little live button because I was looking at character builder.
Hi, YouTube!
Hi,
Hello.
YouTube!
So. Today we are talking about things
And stuff.
And stuff.
and stuff. Not Katsudan. Although we could talk about Katsudan.
I want to talk about... Screw this. Let's talk about Katsudon.
This is now a Katsudan scream. I did not yet. No, I just pulled open my notepad for taking notes during this, and it pulled up the Katsudan. Like, okay, well, I guess we're changing the stream now. We're talking about Katsudan. No, we are actually, in fact, really talking about encounter building for tabletop games. And why everyone gets it wrong. There we go. It has to be like, inciting, it has to be, we have to get people's attention, right? These 5 tricks! We have 5 tricks? How many tricks do we have? These 5 tricks to improve your encounters! I think that sounds good. Yeah, that sounds good.
You know what? I'll start us off with one right off the start.
Us, sure.
Layered mechanics.
Do we want to start with any basic commentary first? Because I kind of want to talk about the general, just kind of say, hey, this stuff's going to apply to any system. This stuff is going to apply to any game system and any TTRPG that has a combat focus. And honestly, several TTRPGs that don't have a combat focus, this is going to apply to as well. There's going to be, I just want to cover some of the general idea of what we're going to be talking about. That was about it. Sorry, Sprig, go ahead.
I just had a thing pop up that I'm gonna try to take care of here too, actually.
Okay.
Moderation safety thing.
See, in a lot of systems...
Sorry to,
anyways,
bring it up.
every system has encounters in some way, right? Whether it is a social encounter or a combat encounter, every system and every tabletop system has something that the characters have to do verbs for, right? Has some sort of challenge to overcome. We're mostly going to be focusing on combat encounters, though I could do an entire stream on skill challenges and non-combat encounters and social challenges and all that stuff. But I think for this episode, we're mostly going to be talking about, combat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah? So then, layered mechanics. Let's drop this right on out of the gate.
This one is just you're gonna... Most encounters that most people are typically gonna run are gonna be combat encounters. Don't just make your combat a, pool of hit points with an attack that does damage.
Mm-hmm.
You need some sort of layered mechanic to introduce additional, problem solving to the situation. I will use a, really simple example based on an encounter that I ran in my Tuesday game a while back. So for that encounter, I used just some regular guard guard stat blocks and some regular bandit stat blocks. Nothing really significantly impressive. I didn't do any special super special creatures for the encounter. But the party was trying to do a bank heist. I'm gonna cut out some details because if I give full context, it's gonna be an hour of me explaining the campaign.
Which actually is worth pointing out, is that you make your encounters plot relevant. I'll talk about that soon, but I think that's directly related to what you're saying here. Sorry, go ahead though.
So for this particular encounter, the idea was that they wanted to do this bank heist, so to get away with it, the party split, and half of them made a distraction across town, and the other half did the actual break-in.
Mm-hmm.
Because they had, a paladin and a blood hunter, some characters that aren't specialized in stealth and some that are.
Mm-hmm. They
So the
split the
stealthy
party?
characters did the break-in, and the split party did the distraction. And what they did for distraction was they started a gang war.
Oh boy. Oh, that's a choice.
They dressed up in, like, basically partially disguised gang members of one of the gangs in town, and then lit fire to a tavern that was owned by another group. So the enemies in the encounter weren't actually that threatening. The big thing was that they were trying to burn the building down, so they had to light the fire and get it big enough that they couldn't just put it out easily, and then it would call the guards across town to deal with the fire and the violence in the street.
How did you handle having the party split though? I'm curious. Because usually splitting the party is a nightmare.
We did basically 2 different sessions.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that can happen.
Yeah.
That can work.
That's what one of the campaigns I'm in. We had like a 10-people campaign somehow, so we split into 2 parties of 5. And now we do a session for each party that's part of that split. This is pretty interesting. We've been getting a lot more done. But
That
a
does
party of
sound
10
neat.
is too much. Too big.
I wholeheartedly agree. I usually prefer 4 to 6. Any more than 6, and I start to just have trouble keeping track of the spotlight. I mean, this isn't like it's encounter streams are DM streams. This is just the part and parcel. But yeah, having that many players makes it difficult, if not impossible, to be able to evenly split the spotlight across them. Make sure that everybody's included.
Especially because a lot of players or character points and stories end up taking the entire session, so you'll end up like having double the normal amount of just player character storyline.
The point with layered mechanics, though, is like you can make things happen in the environment that are relevant to the encounter. Your encounter should always be plot relevant, as you already mentioned. We'll go into that one deeper on an aside thing. But you can also make, like, creatures in your encounter have mechanics that are based on one another. I'm running one right now, for example, that I have soldier conscripts wielding pikes. And if 3 or more of them are in a line, instead of making an attack, they collectively make one action that just flat out deals d10 damage. So I can use them to hit even the player with super high AC and be a threat just by mobbing them with, like, lighter enemies.
I think that we can even step back a little bit here, and what I want to say is primarily this. And you are you are saying the same thing, just in a different way. If the players are just rolling dice back and forth for 40 minutes, it's not terribly fun.
Yeah.
What I would say, how I would discuss the layered mechanics, as you're saying them, is positioning. Having positioning be important, I think, is one of the core things of a good encounter in my book. Having the positioning be an important aspect of, well, of your movement.
That's... So
Would
to
you
me,
agree?
at least, that falls within the realm of layered mechanics to me.
Okay.
Because you'd make mechanics that make your players position and remain conscious of position and make choices throughout the encounter based on the elements that you give them.
That's fair.
Basically, every encounter is a puzzle box, And sure, your players can smash it with a hammer, but it's probably going to be easier to open the puzzle box than it will be to break it.
And that's actually generally how I like to do encounters, is every encounter is a puzzle of some sort.
Yeah.
It's more fun to do it that way, because otherwise you're just, bashing your head against a wall with HP on it. There's no real difference between just hitting a wall till it breaks.
I sometimes take the puzzle in a very literal sense, as Sprig can certainly attest to, of having combat encounters that coincide with actual puzzles that need to be solved at the same time. One that I'm particularly proud of is actually, if you can remember back all the way, to the first encounter of the New World campaign. I had players on a ship, I had goblins attacking the ship, and then I had the goblins and the player's ship both be attacked by a sea kraken. Which, by the way, the players were level 3 at the time, and the kraken was, a terrifying menace. The players had simultaneously had to deal with the fact that they were being attacked by a goblin onslaught, and figure out how to dislodge the tendrils, dislodge the tentacles that were enwrapping the ship. Thus giving the players two things to work with. Now, if you're going to do this, you do need to make sure that you're balancing the enemies properly, because if you have too many enemies here, this becomes a big problem very quickly. But if giving the players something else to do while working on the combat, it helps to engage players who are not engaged by combat, and DMs who are not engaged by combat. Sorry.
I think one of my favorite puzzle combat encounters I had during the days of 3.5 was we had two experimental weapons that the enemy was using. One had a charge time. The other was immune to damage, but could be grappled and pushed around.
Mm-hmm.
The charge time was 1 turn. So what the players had to do when they eventually figured it out was to push one into the other before dealing with the charge one with the charge time, because that was less threatening because it has a charge time.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. Mm-hmm.
It was a fun encounter.
I've been struggling in Pathfinder because I don't find the way the Pathfinder mechanics for combat really mesh with the way that I like to design combat encounters. It seems like it's more difficult to design combat encounters in the way that I like, which, incidentally, is something that 4th edition does extraordinarily well. I will always talk the praises of that edition, but I think that's one situation where it's pretty easy to say.
It's, I talked about this with Shard the other day about, the nature of the way that Pathfinder 2's, action economy works makes each action do less. Meaning that your turn is, to accomplish one simple task is your whole turn.
Mm-hmm.
So, the example that I used at the time was we were sitting at the kitchen table, our little table in the kitchen,
Mm-hmm.
and standing from prone or standing from sitting in Pathfinder would be an action, right? So then for me to walk across the room would take me a movement action,
Mm-hmm.
and then to flip off the light switch would be another action, and my turn would end, leaving
That's
me
a turn.
in the dark.
Yeah.
In D&D 5th edition, I'm not prone, I'm sitting, so it's free for me to go from sitting to moving, so I can walk across the room for half my movement, flip the switch with a free action, move the other half of my movement, and then have the action in the next room. Or in 4th edition as well, is similar.
Yeah. In 4th edition, you go in the next room. In 4th edition, you go to the next room, and if the DM says otherwise, I roll at them and say, really?
The of rules in Pathfinder 2nd Edition works against it a lot.
Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that you can't make it more interesting. I want to dwell on positioning for a little bit. Because I think it's just so important and so often not handled well. A lot of classes in tabletop RPGs rely on positioning, whether it's the paladin trying to interpose between the enemy and the mages, or if it's a rogue trying to sneak around to get a backstrike, or whatever they need in that edition for to get sneak attack damage, or if it's playing Iron Kingdom's RPG and literally trying to get into the back arc of an enemy without getting a free strike, so that you can get the bonus to attack. And the worst combat encounters are ones where it just goes back and forth and everyone's just rolling dice. We've already established that. And what causes that? That happens when positioning is no longer necessary. When players have their established position, and there's no more positioning to be done. And there's a lot of ways around this. You can have characters just move, like buffer into their HP pools the expectation they'll be taking a couple of free strike hits, and just have them move. Like just let the fighter or the paladin or whoever get the opportunity attack. Accept that. Just say, hey, this encounter. Just say to yourself, hey, this encounter is going to be more interesting if there is more movement. So this character is going to go all the way over here and attack the healer, or attack the archer who's in the corner, and they're just going to soak that free strike. The paladin's happy because, yay, I get to use my free strike and my divine sanction ability. The ranger probably isn't happy per se, but they now have a more interesting a combat situation. And yeah, if you account for that at the beginning of the battle, then good. Also, zones. This is something that I learned a lot from War Machine. Having lots of different zones, different battle areas of the battlefield with different effects, whether it's a smoke cloud, a poison cloud, rough terrain. Having multiple of these on the battlefield can change the dynamics of the fight in a very interesting way.
Yep. Actually, funny thing. That is my favorite whole build in Divinity Original Sin 2. It's just, I create zones of the battlefield and buffs and debuffs for everybody.
No, I played Summoner, so it was important that I made zones everywhere, so I could summon totems of different elements and have elemental effects go off on enemies.
Honestly, if you want to be a better DM, play Divinity Original Sin 2. Unironically.
Yep.
That game teaches you so much about good encounter design, even more than Baldur's Gate 3 does. And Baldur's Gate 3 does a good job of it too, but Divinity Original Sin 2 is a great way to learn how to do interesting encounter design. And a lot of it translates directly one-to-one to tabletop.
I think Baldur's Gate 3 does a good job of, Adventurers League style encounters.
Yeah.
I would not say that it's actually very good encounter design for the most part.
I think one thing that's really cool about Divinity 2's encounter design is you can almost always brute force a solution, but most of these fights are puzzles.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot easier time solving the puzzle than you do brute forcing. But brute forcing is still, a possible thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So several people that I've played with have been like, oh, well, I don't want to play anymore because you're playing a mage and all of us are dealing physical damage, so, not doing physical damage is throwing. Because if we do split damage types, we have to deal with both armor types. It's problem solving.
Yeah, not to mention... Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say the counterpoint, fighter with polymorph is broken, but that was it. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was going to say,
that's
half
more
the
specific,
enemies don't have mage armor, though. So, you're automatically doing damage to them without having to deal with that armor. You're intended to have a mixed
That's now we're getting into like game specific mechanics though. Is I guess
Yeah.
that's
we should probably
game-specific
pivot away.
mechanics.
So
I found that like Baldur's Gate had some encounters where they did a really good job, and a lot of encounters where they just like they kind of like just invalidate options that you have in your arsenal.
how do you mean?
Like, oh, well, we're gonna have this fight with the ogre on the bridge. Oh, but you can't shove the ogre. He's too heavy. I don't care if you have 26 strength and you're enlarged. You can't shove him, he's too heavy.
I don't care if you built your character entirely around shoving things. It's not allowed here.
Yeah, exactly. And that is a problem that happens a few times. And they often don't do anything like super different with an encounter. It's usually just like different creatures that are arranged in a space that occasionally has a hazard.
Mm-hmm.
So like, for Adventurers League style play, it's fine. It's like perfectly good to get ideas for how to run like the most basic of basic style. But Divinity Original Sin 2 is like way above and beyond better on design.
True. All right, so I want you to pick a letter and a number between 1 and 10.
B4.
B4. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. That is Bandit Leader. Want to see what a Bandit Leader what they do?
Sure.
47 HP, AC 18. Their spear can mark the target, so the target takes -2 to hit anybody other than them. They also have a crossbow, and they have a recharge ability that recharges on 5 or 6 that does a D10 plus 7, and the target is knocked prone. Just a regular everyday bandit leader in 4th edition has the ability to make sure a target is focused on them, and the ability to sweep someone's legs out from underneath them. Those are both very interesting mechanics. And that's what I want to get into with more of these interesting layered mechanics that we're talking about here. Is every character should be able to do something neat. I ran a combat encounter recently where when one of the gunners, pistoliers, was at below half health, they could backflip away from their attacker and shoot. And if they got hit, they would shoot back in their as a counter, making them a bit more versatile, but also making them more interesting, making them more fleshed out as combatants. What does anything do that is interesting? Everything should be interesting in some way, and threatening in some way, for that matter, even if it is just stopping you from getting to someone else.
Would you like me to explain the style that I use for creating creatures for my encounters?
Please.
So, something that I do is I, like, soft develop, like, factions, quote-unquote. So I'll use undead because it's, like, one of the most staple, simple examples that you run. You fought skeletons and zombies in a D&D campaign, I'm sure.
Yes. So many.
So I have different examples of, like, classes of creatures, big air quotes.
Mm-hmm.
I have my chaff, or like just mooks. This is an enemy with like low hit points, no unique, like super unique abilities. It is a thing that is going to be like a tarpon, but it feels like it's a creature that you can beat in 1 or 2 hits usually. So they are present as more of a hazard, like an area hazard, than they are a significant threat most of the time.
Minions, yeah.
Yeah, so in this case, I'll use skeletons and zombies. Basic skeleton, basic zombie. Skeletons are a little bit quicker, they're a little bit more, like, aware of self-preservation. Usually I have them use their short bows and kind of, like, poke out from cover, plink some arrows, and then poke back into cover.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't really change their plan. They kind of do the same thing no matter what's going on. And zombies just move straight at whatever's closest and attack it.
Right.
And then I introduce I run my first encounter with the undead using just those. And it's like, look, these are the basic rules, you understand how these guys work. And then my next encounter, I'll add in one of the creatures that I used. I called a skeletal bulwark. It's an armored skeleton with a greatsword. So it's a bit more damage. He also multi-attacks on his opportunity attack. So you don't want to, like, walk away from him because you get punished extra hard.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that when one is prisoned, he can command other undead to do different things. So he can tell the zombies to focus on a certain person. He can get the skeletons to form into, like, firing lines so that they all shoot at the same target, or things like that. So it makes those things that are already there more of a threat without being a significant change in mechanics overall for himself.
How did you convey to the players that they could multi-hit on opportunity attacks? How did the players get that information?
The way that they got that information was that he, like, actually holds a stance, basically. Like, it's not just enemy holding, like... It's not just skeleton holding a sword and, like, haphazardly swinging. They're swinging like an actual trained combatant, basically.
Gotcha.
And I communicated to them that every time that they were, like, repositioning, he was also repositioning and jockeying and trying to keep them from getting out of his range.
Okay.
And then you add, like, okay, well, now we've got our next X Factor. We're gonna add a spellcaster in, and I added a demi-lich. I don't care what the official definition of demi-lich is. They're wrong, much like with dragonborns. Dragonborns have tails.
Right, that head.
Yeah, so the demi-lich is a undead spellcaster. It's a little more focused in, like, my setting because of the way that they work, but demi-lich, do they have a pseudo-phylactery? No, so the reason that they're a demi-lich is that basically they achieved lichdom by separating their soul from their body, but failed to create a phylactery, so it bound back to their corpse.
That just sounds like a vampire with less cool tricks.
Yeah, basically. So the demi-lich is, like, not much of a threat in melee. They've got a long sword, they can fight if they have to, but they're not very good at it. Instead, they have some spells. They have, functionally, it's a firebolt and slightly nerfed fireball and, burning hands. The unique mechanic that they have, though, is that the damage dealt by their spells restores half damage to undead and does not deal damage to undead with those spells.
Nice, and then you give them AoEs so that they can heal while damaging, I presume?
Exactly. So they throw, like, a fireball that does slightly less damage, but half the damage that a living creature receives is given as hit points to all undead in the blast. Even if they are downed.
Ooh, exciting.
So it's like, oh, you fireballed this group of skeletons and then moved into the space that they were occupying, and then this demi-lich fires a fireball back at you. It's a soul vortex. And slurps some of your life into the skeletons and they get back up. Now you're surrounded.
Yep, and now, guess what you've done also is require positioning, because you have to take down the lich first, while avoiding them, and they're getting in your way, and everything is a huge menace, and you have to worry about blast areas, and where is going to be the most dangerous place for them to drop the big AoEs.
Or you can brute force the solution and finish a skeleton or zombie. Basically, you crush their skull and they can't be reanimated again.
Or that, yeah. Good to have multiple ways to solve it, too.
Yeah. And then I made another creature for the next time they encountered them. Well, I made a few for the next time they encountered them. But the big one that I'm going to talk about here is the, like, mini-boss style mob. Which is a creature I called a flesh heap. It is a giant skeleton that is reanimated and, like, is covered in other undead, basically, zombies and skeletons, that hold it together. Think the Rotten from Dark Souls 2, basically.
Yeah, I got you. That's exactly what I was thinking.
It only moves 20 feet per turn. It can't dash, it has a very low speed. But it does a lot of attacks and a lot of damage. It has, like, 2 fist attacks and several, like, smaller bites if it hits with a fist.
Mm-hmm.
Because basically it grabs you and now you're covered in, like, zombies and skeletons that are all biting and grabbing at you. So the mechanic of the flesh heap is that when it dies, it breaks up into another, like, D6 zombies and D6 skeletons. So you kill it and it turns into smaller creatures, but its main thing is that if it moves into a space that's occupied by another undead, it slurps it up and heals D12 plus con hit points.
Okay.
So the trick for fighting the flesh heap is if you can make it walk into a space occupied by living undead, it'll slurp them up and now you don't have to fight them.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can get it to walk over already defeated undead, and then it slurps those up and they can't be raised
Can't be
anymore.
resurrected, yeah. So you can use the enemy to your benefit, and if you have abilities that can move and reposition everybody, then, yeah. Whether that's a simple push or shove, or a forced teleport, or anything else in that direction.
Yeah, so basically the trick for fighting the flesh heap is don't hit it until you've killed all of its backup.
Or only hit it with
Which
things
is a
that,
real nuisance. Which is a real nuisance for an enemy that can do as much damage as it does.
Mm-hmm.
Mink the Kobold would like to ask advice of DM to DM.
Yeah.
And thanks for the hydrate and stretch, Detective.
Mm-hmm. I believe we also, we had a hydrate or dihydrate earlier too.
Mm-hmm.
From Dicey.
So. How do you make a plot-relevant encounter? How do you make a plot encounter that's plot relevant? Obviously, this depends on the plot. I'm not, going to ignore that. But how can I phrase this? What do you do if the players want a combat and you don't have anything on hand?
Well,
I
that's
have an
why
encounter table.
That's why I designed, like, I talked about my stuff as, like, factions, quote-unquote. So I designed multiple different styles of creatures that are all, like, one unified theme. And then whenever my players are in an area that might narratively make sense for one group or another to be there, then I have them face that faction, and I can pick and choose any creatures from that faction to build whatever difficulty level of encounter that I feel is appropriate.
Okay. See, I usually ignore what the creatures are in favor of what they could be. Because if I pull up any individual character from any Dungeon Master's Guide and from any system, it's a set of rules, functionally, right? At the end of the day, it's a set of rules, very few of which are unique to a particular character. You can take a fight against a manticore and say, you know what, no, this is a hippogriff. You can take a fight against a elven soldier and say, you know what, no, this is a giant ant. And use the same rules, so you still have a balanced encounter with the rules of the game, with the rules of the system that you're using, but it's balanced, but reskinned. Reskin everything, top to bottom, I say.
My hot take?
Yeah?
Don't use the monster manuals at all.
Honestly, that's good advice, but yeah, that's a bit more advanced.
I've used the mooks and stuff. I might borrow a stat block. I rarely use anything more than that, though. Because rather than worrying about what creature the monster manual has, I make the creature that does the thing that I want it to do.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Or modify it at least. If you can use them as a baseline and then modify them out to be what you need them to be. Oops. I do want to also comment on something you had said earlier about minions, about having these little low HP characters that fill up things.
Mm-hmm.
In 4th edition, that's an entire enemy class called a minion, and it is strongly advised to add minions to every encounter.
I was actually
and in the middle of
doing that
encounters.
for my RPG that I'm making as well.
Nice. And in the middle of encounters, if the encounter starts to drag and get less interesting, either have the enemies surrender and call it there because they know they're outflanked and maneuvered, or I strongly suggest rolling encounters. Have an encounter bleed into a second encounter, either because something else engages, or they call for backup, or their cavalry arrives. Someone getting bailed out by the cavalry arriving doesn't need to be the players; they can be the enemies. And that can revitalize a encounter that's starting to drag on. If you have a couple of characters with more HP, shove a bunch of more minions in there. Have them have 4 or 5 more come in here.
Do you mind if we address Make the Kobold in my chat is asking for advice on a specific thing?
Yeah, I have a few ideas on that one.
It feels relatively relevant too.
Go ahead.
My players all seem to very much brute force encounters. Basically, they go after one specific monster and gang up on it, and if I add many smaller monsters, they kind of ignore them. What is a way that I can get my players to think more tactically without throwing a bunch of stronger monsters at them?
Traps.
I say add intrigue.
I would say A, traps. B, make the minions non-ignorable. Have them do stacking damage the more that are adjacent to you. All of a sudden, oh, wait a minute, that minion hit me for 18 damage. Uh-oh, we can't ignore these anymore. Like, what they're doing is min-maxing, right? What they're doing fundamentally is just min-maxing and saying, well, target priority, take this thing down first, go to the next one. And it's a very machine or logic. It's a very, machine type of thinking. And yeah, I would say whether it's giving enemies that teleport or giving enemies that are highly mobile that can, disengage and still attack and then move away. Make there a way for the enemy to force movement and put the players in a worse position. Maybe they let everybody on their team slide 2 squares, slide 10 feet, if you will, depending on if you're using grids or not. And in that case, the enemy can, if you bait them into coming into range, or actually they're probably all mages, given that it's if they're power gaming like that, I'd imagine. Now that I think about it.
I actually have a separate thing. I like a different thing that I can talk about. So I have one that I recommend using if you ever have a bigger mini boss style creature. Add Paragon actions. They were a really cool idea. I really liked them. A Paragon action is basically a legendary action. A creature that gets Paragon actions gets a number of Paragon actions equal to the number of players in the encounter minus 1. So if someone gets incapacitated, they lose one of their Paragon actions.
Okay.
So Paragon actions are really cool. You can do things like, oh, it gets to move half its speed without provoking opportunity attacks. Or, oh, it uses a Paragon action and sacrifices one of its minions to regain hit points. Or gains a bonus to AC until the end of the next creature's turn, or something like that. Feel free to use Paragon actions and Legendary actions. Basically, that's one of my biggest pieces of advice.
Yep, especially for encounters that don't have a lot of monsters in them.
Yeah, Mink, basically a Paragon action is a legendary action that scales to the number of players that are still actively in the fight.
Right.
So legendary actions are typically much bigger actions that they can do a limited number of times per round. A Paragon action is something that's more minor, but you can use more often as long as there are more players.
You could also do some sort of adaptive defenses thing, where the more attacks that they receive, the higher their defenses go, making the best way to do damage being to spread it out. That would actually throw a real big wrench in their plans. Give something plus 1 to AC, reflex, fortitude, and wisdom and will every time they get hit. Well, and then have it decrease by 1 each turn or something. That could be a big problem for them.
I had another encounter that I did a while back too that had a similar thing for, like, making it so that you can't just ignore the minions. So it was a giant evil flower.
Okay.
Flower.
So for the flower, what it did is every round it would summon D4 plus 1 smaller flowers at random locations on the field. The flowers were basically mini spike growths. And then every time that it took damage, it would also summon another one.
Oh, that can get out of hand real fast.
And, basically it made it so that the players had to, like, be conscious about where they were walking. And then you think, oh, well, what if they just fly? That encounter, I gave the boss a Paragon action that does big damage in an AoE only against flying creatures.
Ah. Okay, so it had an... okay.
It was an ability that basically the flower's roots had spread so far out that it was grabbing the roots of other trees in the area. And they had basically there were trees that were growing here that were something that I had made for my world called sword trees. The leaves of a sword tree are basically like big razor-sharp seed pods. So it would shake the tree and you'd have basically these big long razor blades come flying through the air at you.
That sounds kind of awesome, actually.
We had something similar in a campaign recently. Except they were like, they were called like flensing leaves or something. And in order to move in that region, you had to have special equipment or you get flensed, which is not nice.
Kind of thought of that. You'd be worried that they would think you're cheating in a way.
Who cares?
You're making
Yeah.
encounters that are fun.
You're the
If
DM,
they
everything you
think
do is
that you're
cheating.
And as long as they are having fun is what's important. It doesn't, like, as a DM, it doesn't matter that much if you cheat.
And on that point, though, I will say, if they have the most fun with making combat about checking boxes on a checklist, then give it to them. You know,
Yeah,
like at the end,
sometimes-
like if what they want is to do a fight where all they do is gang up on one creature and punching them down, make encounters that encourage that. That's the other option, is to say maybe you're wrong for like I would argue that I would have a lot more fun in different encounters than that, but not so much to say that they're wrong. And if that's how they have fun,
is
Good.
try mixing it up and then asking
Yeah.
how they felt about the mix-up. And if they
Agreed.
don't like the mix-up, they just like that means they just like hitting their head against the enemy till it dies, and lean into that then.
Then it's up to you if that's the game you want to DM, because that's what the game the players want, and, well, you want to give the players what they want.
Otherwise, you can do interesting things like have an enemy that they obviously want to fight, but then have it blocked off by their minions. Like have it so the minions are able to stop their progress or movement, and make it so they essentially protect their boss. So they're then forced to do stuff like fight the minions, or do like what I like to do is have specific intrigue enemies that seem to do things out of the ordinary.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. How out of the ordinary are you talking?
Like doing things like teleport or throw around an item between themselves, and that item does something important for them.
Mm-hmm.
Either like gives them extra resistance or heals them or something, which the player would then be like, maybe I want that item.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that I did was I had a campaign encounter where the enemies dropped little orbs that would explode on their next turn, so the players had one full initiative pass to get out of the way, and I showed it off. Also, this goes into what we were saying, what Spig was talking about before, about letting people know about the opportunity attack thing. I let the players know that was happening by having the first one go off in a place where it couldn't hurt anybody, and then highlighting that it would have done like 3d8 plus 10 damage or something, like a obscene amount of damage. And now the players, having seen that, having visualized and seen that explosion, going, oh, if one of those is near us, we need to move. Which, then I could get them to, well, get one of those things coming up into melee with them, have it set to self-destruct, and all of a sudden the player's like, okay, we need to evac this area, disengage, move around, change positioning. It forced the players under threat of explosives to reposition while still keeping it fair, while still keeping it, as their choice to move, as opposed to having them thrown around the battlefield by a creature, which can work too in depending on the situation if you don't overuse it. D&D, yeah. Video games. I'm sorry, tabletop games.
I think they want to be more challenging because they've come in and told you that they want harder encounters, so you're just wanting another way to increase the difficulties without there being a few stronger monsters.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of my soft rules that I hold is you don't beat your players with big monsters. If you want to kill player characters, you do it with small monsters.
A bunch of kobolds in their traps.
No, not even a bunch. To set the tone for my players that, tactics and thinking intelligently would be valuable at the start of the campaign, I had them face 2 bullywugs. It was 3 days in a swamp that they were being pelted with poison darts by 2 bullywugs with 1 bullpipe.
Yeah.
I've never gone back to that swamp to fight bullywugs.
Well, for good reason. Yeah, that's... Ooh, my arm. Ah. Okay, my arm broke. 1 sec. Or tracking, to clarify.
Just bite it. Show it who's boss.
Assert dominance on your own body parts.
There we
It's
go.
the only way.
What was I saying? I was gonna say something. I have no idea what it was. Oh well. But yeah. Making the encounters more dynamic, with more of the layered mechanics, with more repositioning. Add in the puzzle fight, like I was talking about before. Add in an obsidian challenge in the middle of the encounter that the players have to deal with. That was going to require them to choose, are they attacking the enemies or are they dealing with the puzzle, and give the puzzle a good timer. I used a ship being cracked apart, but like it could also be defusing an explosive device, or I don't know, trying to untangle a maiden from an oncoming train. Any sort of any sort of additional thing that the players have to do in addition to combat, that not to distract them, but to force them to make more choices that are interesting.
So on that note, fun side thing. I also recommend the DMs doing encounter design play alongside like Divinity Original Sin 2 for encounter design. I recommend Left 4 Dead and Vermintide. So, an example in Vermintide that I'll use really quick is that partway through a in a like mine encounter in Vermintide, there's a big. You're trying to bring down the cavern on a troll nest. And to do that, they have a minecart that they go to the supply chambers in the mines and get a bunch of barrels of gunpowder, and then they're escorting the cart through the whole level.
Okay.
And then there's sections of the cave where it's so dark that you can't see more than like 10 feet out ahead of you. But the minecart has a lantern on it that sheds some light.
Okay.
So you need people close to the minecart and pushing the minecart. And also to be like balancing, fighting the enemies, collecting the gunpowder barrels, keeping the cart moving, keeping it in the light so you know where you are, and dealing with all the various enemies at the same time.
Somewhere between Donkey Kong Minecart Madness and and Team Fortress 2.
Kind of.
But it's not a bad mechanic idea. I like it.
Yeah. Or, Left 4 Dead 2 has another one at the end of the mall level, where to escape you need to use this stock car that's out on the mall floor. But the gas tank's empty, so you have to run all over the mall collecting gas tanks to carry, gas cans to carry back and fill the tank.
With the threat that the enemies are going to be infinitely coming, so the more that you attack, the worse you're going to be because of that split focus. But you have to attack some to get through them.
Exactly.
It's not just beat enemies until they're pulp. It's get to a goal.
You are trying to accomplish a goal while enemies are present, which is a callback to that one I talked about before, where they were trying to burn down a tavern that was owned by one of the gangs.
Honestly, looking at a lot of games with just interesting mechanics is a good way to do it. Like even looking at PvP games, like say Team Fortress, the push the cart while fighting the enemies is actually a really interesting thing to do.
Yeah. And look at other systems. Like, not even to play them, although you should, but look at other systems for ideas. Look at AD&D Planescape. Look at Call of Cthulhu. Look at Dark Heresy. Look at Iron Kingdoms. Look at Iron Claw. Look at Mouse Guard. Look at Rogue Trader. Look at all of these different the systems to get ideas. Monster Kara Squad. To get these different thoughts rattling around your brain of elements that you can use that might work. Look at Thirsty Sword Lesbians. Just in general.
Just look at it in general. Just play it. It's a good game.
Yes, it's a good game. Mm-hmm. Iron Kingdoms, that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. Yeah,
I actually really wanted to get to play Iron Kingdoms. The setting is really cool.
It
And
is.
it was just the tabletop like war game had issues.
Yeah, it was still one of the best war games in my opinion, which is not to say it didn't have issues. But that said, the Iron Kingdoms game I thought was very good under one condition. If you have a warjack or a monster, you have to treat it as the party's, not an individual player's. Because one player can start off with a warjack, and for the game to function, you need the team to recognize it as their warjack and not that player's warjack.
Because it's really strong.
Because it's extremely strong, but it's supposed to be the centerpiece of your team. It is this giant steam powered robot that punches things and that you work alongside. It's controlled by one player though, so in some campaigns it's possible for the players to be like, well, that's their thing. It's like, no, it's all of your thing.
It's an important part of your composition as a team.
Mm-hmm. That's my only real complaint, and that's not even one that I've experienced firsthand. It's one that I experienced secondhand. But even then, yeah, look at the map layouts for what was War Machine, or Infinity. Infinity is a really good game to look at for inspiration for map layouts. Really is.
Infinity was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
It was very hard to play, but it was very cool.
Yeah, it was a little jank. It was a tiny bit jank.
Yeah, Simo was just confusing. Thank you for the sippy toozy. I needed that.
Rawr.
I think the biggest fall for Infinity though was just that it was only metal minis.
I mean, I appreciated that. I prefer the metal minis in general, but that's just me. I also use metal dice, so, you know.
Yeah, I just like, as a painter collector type person, I can't stand metal minis. Paint just doesn't hold on them.
Oh yeah, you gotta prime them better.
Well, it's like the minis can warp and paint, like even your primer just falls off of them.
Really?
Yeah. One of my Trollblood heroes for War Machine, I have painted, no joke, 9 times.
Wow. I've only had that problem, and I played Trollbloods, if I didn't wash them, because they do put a anti-mold agent on the miniatures. They should have been.
Yeah, I washed them.
Huh? What kind of paints were you using? If you don't mind me asking.
Citadel and Army Painter.
Okay. I mostly use Reaper personally, so I'm not familiar with those.
Citadel is the like Warhammer official, and Army Painter is like the general one that a lot of people use.
Okay. Reaper's the budget one.
Yeah, I could never, no matter what paint I ever used, I could never get it to stay on a metal mini.
That's unfortunate.
Because eventually it will just warp from, like, the room temperature changing too much one week, and then an arm bends and all the paint on the entire arm comes off.
See, my problem with the resin minis is that they come pre-warped. You know, they don't warp as much day to day, but they come pre-warped when you buy them. I had that problem a lot.
But if you just run them under warm water, you can bend them back. The resin is, I agree, like, not great.
I also like the weight.
Best,
like, I'm also going to.
I like the weight. I like the weight of the metal minis, but I can't stand the metal to paint them. I gave up on my Dark Altar Archon ages ago because I painted him, and then it's like, okay, I finished painting my mini and I put him down on the table and paint falls off of him.
No.
So I repaint him and then he falls off again, and then I repaint him and then it falls off again, then I repaint him and it falls off again.
That sucks.
Yeah, it eventually got to the point that I just like dunked it in some degreaser, let all of the paint come off, and just left it bare metal. Sorry, that was a side tangent. I can't stand metal minis.
No worries. But yeah, checking out other systems and seeing how they handle encounter in general, how they handle encounters in general, is a good idea. Because that can help spark ideas. It can help give you other directions to go. If every encounter is punch all enemies until there are no more enemies anymore, it's going to start drying up. Even if you have good everything else, the encounters themselves need to have some plot relevancy to stay interesting, and or need to have interesting mechanics, puzzles, positioning. All these things are good. A leader in having their minions around them for support. A bunch of medium-sized enemies, but a whole bunch of them, every single one being a minor threat. Having, a front line and a back line with guardians protecting their rangers, like having different battlefield layouts. Yeah.
I'm actually really enjoying this auto builder button. It's I don't know about the 17 minions it's generating for the encounter, but
No, that sounds fine. No problems there.
I don't know if I have no idea if you're being sarcastic or not with that, because it fits in the budget.
One of my other things to advise, just generally in the layered mechanics conversation, is don't be scared to mess with the action economy a little bit.
Sorry. Yeah?
So that's like the Paragon actions that I talked about before. I also added something called Overkill actions. An overkill action is like, okay, this creature is they can't do anything else. They spend their action on this, their movement becomes 0, they have no bonus actions. They lose their Paragon actions, lose their legendary actions. They're just doing this thing. And that thing, if you don't avoid it, just kills you. No saving throw, no nothing, you die.
Additional effect dead. Or you could use unconscious if you don't want to just, drop the kill button, but...
Nope. Kill.
Nope. Kill. Okay.
Overkill action is kill.
Okay.
So my thing for an overkill action is don't introduce it until your players are level 8 anyway. They're gonna have access to resurrection spells by then.
That's a good point, yeah.
Because an overkill action is basically it's your raid soft enrage mechanic, where everybody focus them down now, kill them because they're doing the one thing, and then everyone dumps all of their DPS on a single target at the same time. You need to have a creature that's tough enough to survive it.
True. I will say though that my philosophy is that a player's death should always be a discussion between the player and the DM, rather than a thing that just happens. That's my philosophy.
My philosophy is that death's like a comic book. in D&D, and most TTRPGs for that matter, you're not dead just because you died. It's just another adventure to go on.
You're not dead just because you died. Oh, that's a good contextant. People die when you
Also,
kill them?
My Tuesday party, for example, had one of the player characters has died twice now. He died once in his backstory, then died again once in the campaign. And then they cast a resurrection spell on him and they brought him back. It
Seems
wasn't that big of a
reasonable.
deal. But I've designed the entire cosmology of my world so that if my whole party, like I have a whole party death, for example, the way that the world works is that it is a cycle of reincarnation. Their soul goes to another plane after they died. So they get sent to the divine bureaucracy, basically. They're in a new plane, they're all still together, they can still, find their way back to the material plane from there. The story's not over. It's just a new adventure that you're going on.
Yeah, I think that in this direction as well, if something has, I agree wholeheartedly, and I think that it's important to make the note that losing an encounter does not necessarily mean everyone dies.
Exactly.
It can be another planar thing. It can be usually. I think getting captured is the best option in general because that is something that is almost always applicable. Or it could just be you guys wake up in a ditch, or maybe you are now bound to some other, lesser deity who has resurrected you, and you now owe them a favor or your life. And there's a lot of directions you can go that's more interesting than, I guess everyone rolls up new characters.
Yep. That's the worst way to deal with it. Also, Mog is asking, if I started making a system, what do you think is probably the most important thing for me to look at? That depends on what you want your system to do.
My thing, 100%, is action economy. It does not matter what system that you are making. Your players should feel like they have the ability to accomplish what they are setting out to do in their turn.
I want to zoom out and say just combat. The most important thing for your system needs to do is combat, because if you are not doing combat, you don't need your system. You can roleplay with just your characters and maybe a couple of skills optional, and without anything else, just using cooperative world building, role playing, and communication. The system exists for combat in my book. Yeah?
Because you can't have a system that's not made just for combat.
Oh, absolutely. But I think the combat is one of the first things to focus on, because that's where where the system is most present in most situations. Yeah, there's Monster Care Squad is a good example.
But the backbone of what makes combat feel good is the action economy.
I played a few systems where there was no combat or very, very little combat. And the majority of what you do with the system is skill challenges. I mean,
which
90%
I think is
also a valid way to do it.
It is. I mean, 90% of the New World campaign is talking to NPCs and learning about mysteries. Like that's 90% of it, by volume. Like most of the New World campaign does not need a system, because. Check out the playlist on the playlist tab of YouTube.
That's why I'm bringing up, if you're going to make a system, the action economy is the spine. It is the backbone that everything is built off of. It's the foundation that you need for anything that you're going to do with the system. So, I'm going to use an example, in video games. In XCOM, you can move, then you can shoot, or do an action, and then your turn is over. Right? So you can accomplish your task of move and shoot. It's basically the only things you have to do in that game anyway.
Depends which one, but
For
yeah,
the
go
most
on.
part. For the most part, for that game.
Play Chimera Squad, it's amazing.
And then
Sorry.
they have a bunch of things that, yes, Chimera Squad is fantastic.
It is a good
And they have a
game.
bunch of things that, like, mutate that action economy of the simple move and shoot. Oh, this is a shoot that you can't move. Oh, this you can shoot twice instead of move. Oh, you can
Ooh.
move twice. Oh, you can use this to move and then shoot.
Movement and shootment. Overpowered. Please nerf.
Yeah. And then you look at, say, Dark Souls. I can move and I can attack, I can dodge, I can do all of these different things, and my stamina is what limits how much I can move. My actions are limited by my stamina rather than by an arbitrary turn-based system.
Mm-hmm.
Both are different ways of handling an action economy that can scale and change depending on what you're doing with your system. But both games would be dramatically different if you were to change that.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
And it's really just it establishes a vibe.
And also, if you want some more ideas for non-combat, for systems that have lots of good rules for non-combat, first of all, look up the Obsidian skill challenges. They're extremely good. I have modified them to my own uses and use them extensively. Monster Care Squad is another system that has a lot of good non-combat solutions. It's built around them fundamentally. And one that I will say is, look, it might be combat, but not necessarily paranoia. Paranoia is great at trying to find solutions. You familiar with paranoia?
Not particularly. I'm pretty sure it's a horror game, so I steered clear of it.
Kinda, I guess. Yeah, maybe.
I am very bad with horror.
Yeah, the general idea of paranoia is that friend computer is there to help you. You are there to help friend computer. Everyone loves friend computer. You are not allowed to say that you do not love friend computer. You are not allowed to touch anything that is of a color that is above your clearance level. If you do, then something bad happens. So if friend computer finds out, you might be punished in some way. So the players or you may need to might get a benefit from actually doing a little bit of casual backstabbing as a treat. One of the classic things.
And call attention to this really quick. I'm sorry to divert.
That's
I
fine.
mentioned it in your chat, and I wanted to make sure it gets to both like mine and Bucket's chats too.
Yeah.
The first part, like looking at older games and trying to figure out what's wrong with them, what they're trying to do, is good. But the big one is also look at war games for inspiration when you're designing or running encounters and stuff. Because war games is where TTRPGs started, and they still have a lot of good ideas.
Yep.
That's yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. One of the classic things to do at the beginning of a game of Paranoia is to put out a bowl of Skittles, and if anybody touches a orange or red one, they lose one of their clones because that's above their clearance level. It's an interesting system that I highly recommend everybody look into to understand some of what it does, because it does some very interesting. It does some. Look, it's hard to talk about it because Among Us exists now, but this existed for decades before Among Us. But it has some of that same social conflict vibe at times. Not in the, not it's different and more cooperative, and it is a tabletop game as opposed to a mini game simulator. But this idea of this a little bit of social engineering and trying to figure out who's looking for what. You're all working towards the same goal with an asterisk on the end because each player has their own sub goal, which may or may not be beneficial to the party. That's the long story short of Paranoia. It's a combination of a TTRPG and a social deduction game.
Social deduction?
Yeah. But because it actually has a narrative, it actually has like a campaign component, it's more in-depth and more interesting than something like Mafia, right? Like, because that's always the same game every time. This is actually a campaign, but drawing from that idea of Mafia. Or Town of Salem, or what have you. So I just wanted to info dump that because, again, this is one of those systems that even if you don't play it, and I don't necessarily recommend that you do, it's not for everybody. I do recommend that people look into it because it will give you a bunch of ideas of how to handle other things in other games. It's a great resource for getting your brain working. Much like the tabletop games things where, like I brought up Iron Kingdom RPG multiple times and War Machine, and that's the same idea. It's like those games have these components in them that will help you design for other encounters. Be careful about video games, though, because video games often have enough abstraction or enough impersonalization that some mechanics don't transfer over well.
Yeah.
They might, but you just have to be more careful if you're trying to draw from video games. But using them as an inspiration point, absolutely. And some work better than others, like Divinity, obviously, we were mentioning before. A lot of that translates one-to-one. But you were talking about the cart pushing thing. It's like, that's great, but you have to be very delicate about that because, trying to take anything else from TF2 might end up being...
disastrous.
I was going to say shallow, but you're not wrong.
Like capture the flag or capture the
Oh,
intel.
boy.
That's probably not as fun in a tabletop RPG as it is in an FPS.
I mean, not
Or
unless, like...
capture the point. Well, capture the point could be adapted pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, Spig, you were saying?
I know Strixhaven actually has the, I don't remember the name of the game. There's a game that they have in that one. So, you could do Capture the Flag or something like it in a context like that in a TTRPG and it would still work.
Mm-hmm. Or you could make an entire campaign, like MS 8th Team could be reconfigured entirely top to bottom to be an Iron Kingdoms RPG Capture the Flag game.
Oh my
Sorry.
god.
Okay, now I kind of want this. This actually sounds amazing.
The RPG capture the flag, that sounds a little cursed, but also possibly fun when I really think about it.
But like war game style, but like actually having to go across, like a battle, like not like a playground, but like actually going across a war zone.
It'd be interesting if you found a way to make a blind for it, so you have two parties working against each other. Actually, that might be really fun. Just two teams working against each other trying to capture each other's flags.
No, PvP is unless you're playing a game that's built around it.
Yeah,
is
PvP
dubious at best.
Is dubious in TTRPG.
Yeah. Aside from the fact that most systems are simply not built for that, like the math aren't built around it.
Yeah.
It's also just people have a deeper connection to TTRPG characters than they do to, well, than they do to TF2 characters. And
I mean, you say that, and there's some people that really, really like those characters.
True, but you're not going to remove someone's tires if you kill someone in TF2, whereas vampire LARPs exist.
Yeah.
The vampires have won.
People get real weird. Now, obviously, playing with adults and playing with people that you know, and actually, that's one thing I'll say as a side thing. It's entirely valid to have friends that you play games with and have fun with that you don't do TTRPGs with.
Mm-hmm.
Entirely valid.
That is an entirely valid point. Yeah, I have a
There are
few
some
friends that I would not want to play TTRPGs with.
Yeah, I have some friends who I care about deeply, who I hang out with a lot, who I would never want to play a TTRPG with, but that's okay because that's that doesn't mean that they're less of a friend. It just means that I know that type of game would flip a switch in their brain, and I wouldn't like how they played it. That doesn't mean that I can't. That doesn't mean that they're not my friend anymore.
It's kind of like, I was just playing in the
What was it?
Robber's Guide one-shot with Liv.
Ah.
I was playing Wizard in that one. There are tables that I play at with friends for TTRPGs where I am banned from playing spellcasters.
I wonder why. I do not wonder why, actually.
Gee, Sprig.
I like getting creative and solving problems with unusual solutions. Unfortunately, spellcasters give me the tools to do that on a much larger scale.
I got banned from playing Cleric at one of the tables that I played at.
Yeah, and it's not even a thing that, I'm intentionally doing something to make the game no fun for the DM or anything like that. It's just... It doesn't mesh with everybody. It's kind of the same thing as, having a friend that you would call a good close or best friend that you still wouldn't want to live with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's all fun and games until you absolutely can't actually get away from them. Because sometimes you need space from even your best friend.
True. So true. So very true. So. Hi.
Hi.
Going back to actually having interesting monsters. Look through other systems, characters, monster characters, enemy characters, whatever you want to call it, and adapt. I will always recommend 4th edition for this, just because so many of the monsters do interesting things. Almost every single monster in the game has some interesting mechanic that it has. Just start sifting through these DM guides and say, oh, I like that mechanic. I want that on this wizard in my system, or I want that on as a spell-like ability that my hippogriff can cast.
Yeah, and there's plenty of resources out there that help you build your own custom monsters, where you have lists of abilities and such, which is very useful. Even lets you publish your own PDFs for them.
Mm-hmm.
I would use those extensively. It's mostly when I see a list of monsters. It's not so much just a list of individual things I can use, but things with abilities I can, transplant to other things and make more interesting combinations.
Mm-hmm. One system might have a human knife fighter, and you might say, man, I want that in this completely different system as a Sahagin. It's like, sure, just take it. What's the knife fighter do? They have a attack that causes ongoing damage from bleeding, and they can dance around and hit multiple enemies. Okay, done. Just copy those abilities over, replace the stat lines with something that's more system appropriate. You have a character. You have an enemy. Reskin everything forever is what I'm saying.
Yeah, especially when you have a very monotyped campaign. If you don't
Mhm.
reskin, you end up with very, very boring encounters eventually, where everyone knows what this does or that does. It's a good way to mix it up.
Yeah. On that note, stop using bandits and humans. Like, come on.
I'm gonna use all the bandits and all the humans.
Yeah, I don't think I agree with that statement either, actually.
I'm okay. Don't use exclusively bandits and humans. I guess is what I'm getting at.
That too, it's.
Make sure you
I'm
mix in a
sure
few
that there
wolves.
is narrative reason or weight to the creatures that you choose and the reason you choose them.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Do agree with that. For me personally, if I was on the player side of it and every single encounter was against a bunch of human bandits, I would lose visual interest and one combat encounter would boil into the next one, even if there was different mechanics and different things going on. Because that is, to me, visually, just, as in my visual brain mind, too monotonous. So,
And that gets into the, don't just do one thing all the time.
yeah.
Which I think is the more useful statement than stop using bandits is don't just
True.
use the same thing.
I guess.
Instead of human bandits, have wolf bandits that trip you
There
instead.
you go.
So, the big thing for me with bandits in particular is that you can tell a lot about a region in your setting in your world by, bandits existing.
Yeah.
Because the only reason that a bandit is going to attack someone on the road is 9 times out of 10 because they're desperate for a way to live. It's an economic problem.
Yeah, you're not wrong, yeah. It's one that's actually something that Monster Care Squad addresses directly.
So, one of the things that happened in my D&D campaign, to use that as an example, I had a Christmas one-shot that I ran for the B team, which is a thing that I do as one-shots in the setting that still benefit the parties. They had a saving Christmas one-shot. And basically it was some bandits were stealing stuff from the holiday celebrations that were going on at the castle that was being constructed.
Okay.
Because the party was throwing massive amounts of money into revitalizing an old castle and city.
Okay.
Well, there was a hedge noble that had lived in this region for their entire life. That their whole family has been here for centuries. And the land just got given to someone else who wasn't even a noble until weeks ago.
How dare they?
So there was some bitterness there, but there's also, lands that the party hadn't taken care of when they first moved in, because they're not established yet, they haven't gotten to know everybody yet.
Yeah.
So they were stealing excess from this extravagant celebration to distribute to the people that didn't have enough.
And they wore white after Labor Day, which is completely unacceptable.
How dare.
Like you can add in,
I don't understand that. I know it's a phrase, I don't know what it means.
Unironically, in polite culture, it used to be a thing that after Labor Day until Christmas, you did not wear any hard whites. You could only wear an off-white. It was a gentry not quite nobility because it was more modern era than that, but it was a gentry thing that was just a rule of dressing. And it's absurd. It makes no sense, really. There's no real functional reason for it, but it was a social mores. It was a thing that was known and accepted. You can make that kind of thing for your own campaign if you're doing nobility or if you're doing different cultures. Have some strange customs that they don't have to make sense. You just have to have a social contract that people follow them.
I get it. I have a guess at the reason.
Huh.
Because it was impolite to the servants. Whites would have to be washed much harder. So wearing white after Labor Day is like, Labor Day, this is the celebration of the 8-hour workday and like workers' rights and stuff. Going into the colder months of the year, up until Christmas, needing to wash by hand in cold water before like internal heating was a commonplace thing. That's my guess anyway.
That makes a lot of sense.
I think it's just more okay. Labor Day marks the end of summer. I think it was. I think it is less comprehensible than that personally.
That's just like a logical conclusion that went through my head at least. Here's an answer. According to Farmer's Almanac, the concept of not wearing white after Labor Day started in the 19th century as a way for the upper class to separate themselves from the working class. Some historians say brighter clothing was worn by affluent groups who could not afford to leave town for a warmer coat. When the leaves began to change, subsequently it became socially accepted that those who didn't have the money to take fall and winter vacations shouldn't don white after the last summer holiday. So it was just a flex.
Yep, it was just a flex. Again, it doesn't have to make sense, but have some people in your campaign setting if you do, especially if you're doing like nobilities, if you're doing landed gentry nobility sort of characterization, just have them be the worst.
Since we're talking about bandits, I actually enjoy humanizing the bandits you encounter in a situation, because the whole point of them being bandits is just there's not enough to go around, so people turn to banditry. And I had a situation.
Sorry. We're talking. We had an entire side tangent about like gentry and aristocracy, and you're like, speaking of bandits.
Yeah, I thought that part of the conversation had come to a conclusion.
Yeah, landlords basically.
Those are the real bandits. Sorry, do
Those
go
are the
on.
real bandits. But I had a situation where a bandit they encountered basically did the whole money or your life situation, and the party, instead of just fighting them, decided to talk to them for a little bit. Guy explains that they have mouths to feed, and this is all they can do. So the party then for some reason still decided to fight them. Guess what the party did? They killed all the bandits except for him. Their reasoning: he had a family. Unlike the other bandits.
The other ones were a bad influence. Gosh, have you ever seen Slayers? Classic anime.
I think I've seen part of it. I don't think I've seen...
There's an arc where where the main characters have a bounty on their head, and bounty hunters are just accosting them left and right. And while they're traveling, and they're just taking them out in waves because of how ridiculous it is. And every single one of the bandits could be the main character of a different anime. Every single one of the bandits has a distinct art style, personality, and is like, I am such and such, the Ravager, and I have and they're like, okay, dude. But that's kind of funny. If your campaign sets for it, make every single encounter someone over the top, somebody who at least thinks that they are give at least one bad guy in each encounter main character syndrome is what I'm saying.
That is a good one. In which case,
Actually,
the
what
bandit
is
that
the-
lived is the main character for their little arc.
Yeah, for real.
One of the recurring antagonists of my Tuesday campaign is just an ordinary bandit. They fought her in session 0, and she barely managed to survive. Basically, they got her to like near death. The fight was going against them. She dove off the boat into the river. They cast sleep on her while she was underwater.
Oh,
Oh my
jeez.
goodness! Wow.
I mean, that
So I rolled
works.
some dice just to see what ended up happening. She ended up surviving. She hit her she hit her head on a rock in underwater, which did enough damage that didn't knock her out or kill her. But it woke her up from sleep,
Fair enough.
so she managed to crawl her way out of the river and survive. They run into her again. Oh my goodness! I need a sip.
Dio comments basically a nemesis system in the making. It's like, yeah, absolutely. Running that.
Nemesis system in the making, yes. The Nemesis system from Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor is great. Yeah, so she survived that encounter. They ran into her again at a festival later. They didn't figure out what she was up to there, but she was around. And then they ran into her again later, and she had, like, assembled a new gang, basically, a new crew. And she had jokingly talked to them because they were trying to cross this bridge, and she was saying, like, you know, we control this bridge now. We've been maintaining it, taking care of this bridge and this roadway. So, you know, just a small donation to help cover the costs of the bridge. So they killed everyone.
Oh.
And she again got away. Because she learned, after the second time she ran into them, these guys are trouble.
Smart
So
that.
she spent basically everything that she managed to put together on, a couple of little things to help make sure she could get away. Including a ring of feigned death and a scroll of a dimension door. Basically, she is the one bad influence bandit. She is the one that, like, collects other people. She tried to go semi-legitimate with the bridge thing. It didn't work. She's now planning revenge. She is still functionally a level 3 rogue.
Oh my god. Okay, where did I go wrong? Maybe the banditry thing. What if I tried maintaining a bridge and getting people to pay for that instead? Okay, that didn't work. Everyone died anyways.
Alright.
So this was supposed to be about encounter design.
Yee.
I mean, this is part of encounter design. You know, having characters recur is very relevant to that, yeah.
It's
mean-
just we've gotten so far into the weeds that we've circled back around to semi-relevant, so I thought I'd point out.
Are you saying that the Labor Day thing was not relevant?
Oh, that was totally relevant.
Yeah, right? Thank you. But the other one would be like humanize the enemies, like you're saying, or look at the Kenku trio in New World. You face them multiple times. You face them in combat multiple times, and
Give
well,
personality, basically.
and at this point, after the last time that they were taken out of a battle, the players actually suggested that they go back to their home and see if they were okay. I consider that a successful character. I consider that a successful character moment. Because that is an enemy, make no mistake. That is someone who tried to kill the players on three separate occasions.
Yep, 3 separate occasions. But after the first one, we learned that they were basically just a kid who was, like, misguided.
Acting out, yeah. And that changed the way that you fought them in the future encounters. And if they show up
First
again...
time we turned one into a pancake.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Bard. You have been promoted to street pizza.
Oh. You are now flatbread.
Flatbird.
Flatbread.
Pepper can now fly his disc. Improvement. No need for wings.
No need for exhausting flapping if promoted to disc.
Exactly. It's really a convenience for everybody. You good?
Someone in my chat just responded, it just felt like a frisbee.
Also, you can use encounters to introduce new mechanics that the players will be facing soon. Hey, Sprig, what was your last combat encounter in New World?
The Manticore, I believe.
What was the Manticore doing?
Summoning, like, illusionary clones.
Illusionary clones that were tangible and could both deal and receive damage. Hey, Sprig, what's happening? Where did we leave off in New World?
Dealing with the illusionary city, basically.
Dealing with an illusionary city that is going to have similar properties in the very near future. Because guess what? I've already set up that that's a thing that exists in that world. That is a thing that can happen in that world. By using the combat to establish that it's going to take the players don't need to be. I don't need to explain to the players about the next thing that they see because I've already highlighted it. This is as an example. I can there's others as well, of course, like having the players hit a cockatrice and finding some metal inside and being like, wait, why is there metal inside of a cockatrice? This opens up an entire subplot that is going to be one of the great mysteries. And over the course of several sessions, that happening more often and in more places just makes the players go, huh. Every individual one is almost meaningless. It didn't even reduce the damage they took, but I added that plot into the in-combat encounter. I made the plot line happen in the... Or when you got your when you found out about your leg, for that matter.
Yep.
Like, lots of ways of making combat encounters plot relevant, and most of them are good. Not all, of course. Also, you will make mistakes. Accept this. Make mistakes faster. Learn to fail faster, make mistakes, and learn from your mistakes. The sooner you make a mistake, the sooner you can learn from it. So screw up as quick as you can. Throw stuff at the wall, try things out. If it doesn't work, don't do it again. If it does, and figure out why it didn't work. But no, just don't do it again. But figure out why something didn't work, and then figure out what you could do to make something like that work in the future, or figure out what parts of it didn't work.
Well, the cycle of being awful at something is just the first step to being kind of somewhat okay at a thing.
Exactly. Sucking at something is the first step to being sort of good at something. I think is the quote. Some Adventure Time. Good show.
I could not get into it. I think I managed to get 3 episodes in.
Oh, it's a strange show, but I found it pleasant. Regardless, it has a lot of good advice. There's actually a lot of really good lines in there that are just genuinely good life advice.
I hear that it's really good in the later seasons and stuff, especially.
Yeah,
it's just
definitely.
It is pain to start.
I can actually understand that. Yeah, it's rough at the start, and I'm not gonna. The later seasons they get a lot better at it, but that's because in the later seasons, you know about the world and they don't have to spend the time explaining the world to you. But you're not wrong. Bah.
Bah.
Are we winding down?
I think so, I guess.
I'm pretty comfortable calling it here. I think we covered a lot of good advice.
I'm
And a
building
bunch of
encounters.
irrelevant advice.
And a bunch of extremely relevant advice. A bunch of the most relevant advice that you will ever hear.
That's right. Do not wear white after Labor Day. It's
Yeah.
a very important fashion rule.
The heck? What were you
Yeah.
thinking?
Just rude to wear white on
Seriously.
Labor Day.
Jeez. Jeez. Alright.
I honestly don't think I even own any white tops anymore.
I have one
Oh,
that's,
I have one sweater.
I have my Monster Hunter Animal Crossing crossover shirt that's white. It says "Welcome to Monster Hunter," but it says it as the Animal Crossing logo, and then it shows the villager in Monster Hunter armor and a palico next to them. It's very cute.
Nice.
Okay, okay, we're talking about clothing now. I'm going to close out the stream because this is talking about clothing again. I should. Okay, okay. Thank you, everybody. You're all wonderful.
Have a good night.
Cheers, friends.
Bye-bye, YouTube.
Bye.
Bye. You.